Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 424. I kicked off with d4 here, and my opponent played d5. And we get the Slav defense. I play c4, the main move, and my opponent plays c6. So knight f3, that's the, I think, the best way to respond. It just prevents this idea of e5, the win-hour gambit, which you can run into if you play the other knight move. Although this is playable, and you'll see lots of players play that. But, well, as black, I always like to play the win-hour gambit, so I'm always happy to see that move, knight to f3 there, or knight to c3 instead of knight f3. So when I play as white, I play as this to stop the win-hour gambit. My opponent goes knight f6, the main move, and I go e3. It's a second choice here. You can play knight to c3 here, and it's a fine way to play, but there are some very sharp alternatives for black, including the note boom variation, which I avoid by playing e3. So now, if he takes his pawn, I just take back with the bishop. And this is a solid way to play for white, too, still keeping an opening edge. And now here's the first move that caught me by surprise in this game. Bishop to f5 is the mainline Slav, and e6 is the semi-Slav. So those are the top two choices. But he played the third choice here, bishop g4, and honestly I've never seen this before. It looks like the best way to respond is to kick the bishop with h3 immediately, and also h3 is an idea later. So I didn't know that. I play knight c3, he plays e6, and now once again h3, and even more so now that the bishop has been it's stuck on this side of the board in a way. I mean, the obvious plan for black in this situation is to develop his bishop outside the pawn chain and then set up this solid pawn chain, so he succeeded in that. But now this bishop is a bit of a target here, and you can start pushing it around with h3, maybe even follow up with g4 and knight to h4 there, winning the bishop pair. Let's see. Let's play h3 and see what the main move is here. Just I want to get the idea here. Okay, so it's evenly divided between taking immediately and dropping back to h5. If he drops back to h5, yeah, then g4 is the idea, bishop g6, and knight to e5. Knight to e5 or knight to h4 would win the bishop for a knight, and suffering a little bit of pawn structure issues. So it looks like that's the way to play this. Take advantage of it by kicking the bishop with h3. So I just continued developing. And, well, we're out of the opening book. Let's just look at the game. He goes bishop e7. We get some very normal developing moves for quite a while. So castles, b3. Yeah, since he hasn't taken the pawn over here, I decide to support the pawn with the b pawn, so this bishop is no longer tied down to defense of c4, and also develop a square for my bishop. There's kind of two plans you have in these kind of queen's pawn openings if we back up a step. One plan is to push on the queen side and push the b pawn rather, and then develop the bishop to b2 and look at this diagonal and then push the e pawn later. The other way to play it is to leave the bishop here on c1 and play for an immediate, or as quickly as possible, push of the e pawn and try and liberate the bishop along this diagonal. So both those plans can be valid. Just kind of play it by ear. So I went with this b3 plan in this position. He goes knight b d7, bishop b2, and now h6 finally kicking. No, I'm sorry. He plays h6. And now there's not as much point as chasing the bishop, because the bishop can always come back to the h7 square and it's not going to get traded off. So I think playing the move h3 before he gets h6 in is probably a pretty smart idea. But I go ahead and go with knight e5 here, starting to get my pieces centrally located. Now the way I play it from here is not maybe the best way to play it, but I think it's all right. I get an interesting position. My mistake comes later. So he drops the bishop back, and I kick out with g4. So it takes the computer evaluation a while to settle down, but it ends up in the range of around even. So what I've achieved by this is I've taken the game into sharp tactical channels at the cost of giving up maybe my opening advantage, which is often a trade-off you want to make, particularly if you like to play, if you're in the mood to play some sharp chess. That's kind of the way to go. But in a few moves I get into trouble. So bishop h7, that's what I was saying. He prepared this nice retreat for the bishop. So this g4 move doesn't come with as much force as it might in other situations. But I follow up with f4, and I thought, well, I'm gaining a lot of space on the queen side. And you can see the evaluation stays in the range of about even. Black chooses to take my knight off. I take back. And then he plays knight to e4, hopping in here with his knight. And I push on with f5. So this f5 move, this is the step too far. So far I'm doing okay, but I can't really afford to push those pawns any further in this position. I need to prepare it somehow. Bishop d3, I think, is a really, that's the computer suggestion here. That's an interesting idea. Putting it on the same diagonal as black's light squared bishop, and being able to trade it off with tempo if the knight ever moves. And, well, the game would just continue from here. I need to maneuver around with my pieces and get them better positioned before I really try to steamroller the the king side. So I just pushed on with f5, and so this is a mistake. He takes on c3. It's not a huge mistake, but a small mistake, and now there's a definite advantage to black, and I have to play very carefully even to stay in the game. So I played, well, he takes f5, take back, and then he goes with bishop to c5. And that's the problem. I push these pawns on, I've left weaknesses in my camp. This is a very difficult pawn to defend, and in fact the engine says I should just give it up at this point and play king h1. If I move the king to the side, he can take this pawn, but I've still got these advanced pawns here, and that is probably compensation, at least to some degree. So let's take a look at that. King h1, bishop takes e3, and then c takes d5. Okay, queen takes check. I don't know if I like the look of this either. Rook to f3, blocking the queen. Why not bishop to f3? Because of queen c5. So I guess the rook needs to lift. It makes sense to lift the rook anyway and prepare to bring pieces behind it. But I guess you can see from this black is still doing fine. And so my advances with the pawns here were a little bit premature. My rook in the corner is not really participating, and the queen's still in the back rank, so the rooks are not connected and not easily brought over to the king's side. So that's the problem with my early f5 push. Anyway, I defended the pawn with rook to f3, but he wins a pawn anyway with queen g5 check, because, of course, that's a fork, and he can now take the pawn with the bishop. Now, the engine says the best way to give up the pawn is to play rook g3, which makes a lot of sense. The rook on the g file could be useful later. I move aside, and then he grabs the pawn, and he is just winning at this point. The problem with my king h1 move is I've placed my king on the diagonal with the rook, and now the rook really needs to go to g3 to prevent further material loss. But, well, I played queen d2 instead, still trying to hold on to this pawn and just ignoring this threat, which I didn't see. I totally missed it. So so that's, I guess, one point I wanted to make is that, well, if you're going to try and play aggressively and get into these sharp positions, you have to be a little more tactically aware than I was in this game. You have to be aware of your opponent's counter threats. So I missed this queen check idea and with the fork, and I missed this skewer. And it's pretty much game over. Let's go through the game a little bit. But he plays this part really well. I think good game by El Kabong here. He didn't really make any mistakes that I spotted. Played interestingly in the opening, and when I overpushed, he took advantage of it. So good game from black in this game. So he wins the exchange here. There was no way to prevent that. And now that was all with check. That's the problem, is that all these moves are coming with check. So I can attack his queen here, but he takes my rook with check. I have to take back, and now he grabs a pawn here. And I should just trade queens, I guess, or rook g3. Once again, I'm looking for counterplay, but yet another tactic. He's got a queen and a queen and a bishop on my rook, and he can just take everything off here with force. So this actually wins a second exchange, because he wins the rook as well as the queen. That was an entirely forced sequence, and Now d takes c4, and it's just mopping up from this point. I play on, just hoping to get a little bit of counterplay in the game, but really he's got, let's see, let's count the pawns. He's got 2 extra pawns and 2 exchanges, which is way more than enough to win. Usually an exchange plus an extra pawn is enough for an easy win, and he's got 2 exchanges and 2 extra pawns. But I did play on just to see if I could make a game of it, but he never allowed any counterplay. And eventually, right here, I resigned. So could have resigned much earlier, but well, I just wanted to give it a try. So that's how the game ended. Hope you guys found that interesting. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.